Joining us, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, video journalist for the Free Press Tanya Lukianova, MS Now senior Capitol Hill reporter and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale in Chappaqua, and staff writer for The New Yorker, Susan Glasser. Ali, conspiracies are hard to control. And this one, there's news on it, if not every day, then every week. And just to put a fine point on it, there are a lot of very high-profile, powerful people who have been taken down by this scandal already. There's no telling where this might go.
I think that's right. And I also think it's why Lisa Rubin and I often talk about this as court of law versus court of public opinion, right? Because typically you see these kinds of prosecutions. And in fact, the very prosecution that landed Epstein in jail is the thing that's done through a court of law. It is slow, it is plotting, it is evidence-based, and it has to happen through the official legal channels of charges backed up with evidence. Court of public opinion, much different, much more flimsy, and much more subject, actually, to the winds of these conspiracy theories that Republicans have pushed for years. Even the fact that Pizzagate showed up yesterday in the Hillary Clinton deposition tells you everything you need to know about the staying power of conspiracy theories that have largely been put into the mainstream ether by people in the MAGA movement. And so I think that what's happening now on the committee is they are trying to combat all of these ideas that have really percolated on the right over the course of the last 10 years. The push for Epstein transparency, in fact, came from people in the MAGA movement in Trump's orbit. And now they are having to underscore what they can find in an actual investigation with facts and try to rebut in real time, and I'm not sure they're doing a great job of it, the conspiracy theories that actually are not based in fact and are not based in what they're finding in this investigation. Quite frankly, DOJ full transparency might help this, but I also think that we're in a place with social media, too, where combating things in real time in dark corners of the internet where conspiracy theories first begin can be really difficult. And just to take it back to the committee's work, I think that's why it's important for us to look at everything as they put it out, including these depositions, transcripts and videos. And it's why Democrats are pushing for those to come out as soon as possible so that people have clarity on what is and isn't being said.
Yeah, Susan, continue on with the politics of this, because there's obviously the partisan nature of it. But again, I mean, there are so many names, and when you're dealing with public opinion and a public's desire for truth, also a public's willingness to believe conspiracy, it's dangerous stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, is the goal of Congressman Comer to rebut conspiracy theories or to promote them when they are concerning Democrats? I think that's part of the challenge here. If your high-profile witnesses are the president who served decades ago and the former First Lady, former Secretary of State, who, again, was in office a long time ago and never met the guy, is that debunking a conspiracy theory or is that promoting a conspiracy theory? Certainly, it's distracting us, right? Part of the goal, it seems to me, of calling the Clintons was for us to have exactly this conversation rather than a conversation about the incumbent president of the United States, whose name, as you pointed out, Katie, appears in these documents more than anyone else's, his first lady as well, a member of his cabinet, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who was literally in business with Jeffrey Epstein after his initial conviction, despite what Lutnick had said publicly as recently as last year. Interestingly, Katie, Democrats on that committee are now saying that they may have the votes, including a Republican or two, to be able to call Howard Lutnick. That would be a big break. This is a Congress, as you know, controlled by Republicans, has not been interested in exercising any kind of oversight or accountability in Trump's second administration. So that would be, I think, really something pretty notable if it were to happen. But so far, again, who are they calling? The Clintons. That strikes me as a political errand, much more so than it is a live action investigation of the kind we're seeing in other countries who are looking at these documents.
The old fights never die. I think this is proof of that. And I think when you point out the Howard Lutnick and how near they are to calling him, getting the Republicans on the committee, that just underscores the fast-moving nature of this, that you can't control it, even if you want to, even if you think you're in charge. But let's do some due diligence on Bill Clinton here, because I think Hillary Clinton is separate from Bill Clinton here. Hillary Clinton was not on the planes. She says she never met Epstein. credibly. And she's got an interaction or two with Ghislaine Maxwell, but that's also murky at best. Bill Clinton and the questions that he will be asked or is being asked by a committee that actually wants to get answers. What are those questions?
I think the questions have to do with his interactions with Epstein and Maxwell, particularly, Katie, in 2002 when he traveled extensively with them all throughout the world. Some of those trips were taken in furtherance of the mission of the Clinton Global Initiative. And Bill Clinton, a former president who was used to private aviation, wanted to travel privately. So what did he do? He borrowed the planes of very wealthy benefactors, including Jeffrey Epstein. One of the questions I think that deserves to be asked is whether Bill Clinton observed anything unusual. Not that he participated in anything unusual, but what did he observe with Jeffrey Epstein? And in particular, I'm thinking about a 2002 trip to Africa that multiple notable people participated in. Chris Tucker was there. Kevin Spacey was there. Ron Burkle, a Los Angeles-based private equity investor, was there. And on that trip, according to an ER doctor who was contracted by the Secret Service to be there to ensure that the former president remained healthy, when he was interviewed, this ER doctor, by the FBI, he basically told the FBI, hey, look, everybody else on the trip had a reason for being there, and yet there are these 4 young women who didn't seem to have any real business purpose. And I also saw them go back into a cabin together and come out. There was something shady about their interactions. I think it's worth asking Bill Clinton what he saw and what caused him to disassociate with Jeffrey Epstein and when or around what time that happened in his life. Not because we suspect that his activities were anything problematic, but because what people saw, what they knew, what they reported, I think is just as important for what Ali calls the court of public opinion, right? Yeah. Accountability comes in multiple forms, and reputation is a form of accountability. People who saw something and didn't, in New York City parlance, say something are people that the public has a right to know about and make their own judgments about them.
Why do you think you should not have said anything? What exactly did you see? Why did that not raise red flags? At the moment, there might be very innocent answers, but they're questions that are worth asking, especially because the story is so dominant. Tanya, you also agree that this testimony is important.
Yes, it is. And precisely as Lisa and Susan spoke before, precisely because there are a lot of legitimate questions that can be raised in regards to Bill Clinton's behavior. Not only is he all over the emails, but he's also in many of the photos, including some of the unsavory photos where we see redacted photos of what appear to be young women sitting on his lap or him in the jacuzzi with other young women. So it's not that he is infallible or that we do not have any specific questions to ask him. So I think this deposition is important. But at the same time, if he is being deposed, then what is to make of the sitting president, as Susan mentioned, or the current former First Lady, who is also depicted in multiple pictures with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein.
So you've been watching all the videos,
right?
A lot of the videos. You just went through all the criminal videos as well, the FBI's interviews with Epstein. You've spent many hours in this. When you look at it, do you get the sense that Epstein was playing for one political team or another?
Absolutely not. If anything, I can say emphatically, after watching close to 30 hours of the footage between multiple data sets, there was never any sort of political angle here. It's not like he was a Republican or Democrat. It was all over the place, and he had enablers, co-conspirators, and friends on both sides of the political aisle. I would say that the most striking thing from watching the batch of footage from Dataset 9, which mostly spans 15 years of investigations, from state and local police officials, from the police in Palm Beach who first started investigating him in 2005, all the way to the FBI probe of him. What is kind of striking and stands out to me is how out in the open it all was. The 2005 Palm Beach police tape of his Florida mansion features image after image of naked or partially naked young women lining the walls on the second floor of his apartment. So presumably, back in 2005, all anybody had to do to figure out who Jeffrey Epstein was or what kind of conduct he was behaving is to go on the second floor of his mansion. That was back in 2005. So the question is, why did it take so long for him to face any real justice?
Susan, is the answer as easy as saying, well, it was a different time?
No, absolutely not. I think, Katie, you're exactly right. People are accountable, not just for whether their own conduct is felonious or not, but who they associate with. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that you get thrown in jail, there's an array of penalties depending on what the allegations specifically are. But I think absolutely, it's very, very fair to ask why it is that people were associating with somebody. I mean, go look at that, tremendous Wall Street Journal scoop about the Jeffrey Epstein birthday book and Donald Trump's, according to the Journal's very suggestive, note to him. I mean, these people were in on it, right? A lot of people understood quite clearly, it seems, who Jeffrey Epstein was. And so it seems very fair to ask why they were continuing to associate with him, why they were doing business with him, what he had over them that made him able to continue these ties even after he became convicted initially in Florida. So I think it's a very important and legitimate set of things. It's revolting. I mean, again, did you just accidentally ever become friends with a sex offender, Katie? No. So I think it's really important that a lot of this information is coming out, but it's coming out in an explicitly political context, as we saw with the reports by NPR and other news outlets this week, suggesting that there were major information and FBI interviews of someone who had allegations about Donald Trump and a young woman that were left out of the files. So again, it's important.
Not to mention,
why are we having this conversation?
Yeah.